on the agenda is citizens' input for anything that is not a part of the agenda already, if anyone cares to address the board. Okay, seeing none, we'll go with the approval of minutes for the September 8th, 2020 Board of Supervisors regular meeting.
Steve, it's Laura. I'll move to approve with one small correction. I think we have to maybe undo an autocorrect. It's page 5 of, page 5, maybe a quarter of the way down. I move that the Board of Supervisors amend section 3A to add the word residence before private dwelling. And it was residence, RESIDENT''S. So it's really probably an autocorrect thing, but since it does change the meaning, I thought I'd bring it up. So motion to approve with that change.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? Okay, so this is a motion to approve with the change that Laura pointed out. Any further comments? All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have the COVID response report from Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if you don't mind, I'll just do the short introduction.
Oh, yeah, I missed that. Sorry.
Before I get into my report. Just want to thank everybody, board, staff, and the public for joining us this evening. This is the September 21st regular meeting of the Board of Supervisors. This meeting's been properly advertised in accordance with the Pennsylvania Sunshine Act as a virtual meeting conducted using the Zoom telemeeting platform. If you're joining the Zoom tonight as a member of the public or as an agent to speak on behalf of an agenda item, I just ask that you enter your name, municipality of residence, and if applicable, the topic you wish to speak on using the chat feature located beneath the word bubble at the bottom of your screen. Just prior to commencing the meeting, a couple of procedural items. First, the public viewing at home may interact with the board by unmuting your microphone when acknowledged by the chairman. Please refrain from using the chat feature to ask questions or offer comments since nobody is monitoring the chat and your comment or question may go unnoticed. Secondly, board members are asked to indicate their name when motioning or seconding a motion so that the minutes may accurately reflect the action taken. And finally, I will now take a roll call of the Board of Supervisors to ensure that all members can hear and interact using the Zoom meeting platform. Please indicate that you are here when your name is called. Mr. Miller.
Here.
Ms. Danini.
Here.
Mr. Mitra.
Here.
Ms. Strickland.
Here.
Ms. Stevens.
Here.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum. Thank you. I'll just roll right into my biweekly COVID update. There have been a number of developments, both regionally and statewide, over the last 2 weeks that I'll briefly touch on before talking about local developments. Excuse me. As many of you know, State College has been reported as the second fastest growing hotspot for COVID-19 in the country. In response, the Pennsylvania Department of Health announced it would be locating a pop-up testing site at the Nittany Mall. The site will be open on September 25th. Will be available between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. on September 25th, 26th, 29th, 30th, and October 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. Residents do not have to be experiencing symptoms to be tested and no insurance is required. Additionally, a strike team has been convened by the Pennsylvania Department of Health and will report through the county. The team consists of staff from the Department of Health, the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency, the Pennsylvania Department of Education, Center County, Penn State, and other stakeholders. They are charged with developing localized mitigation and containment strategies to reduce the transmission of the virus. Penn State University is continuing to maintain and update its COVID-19 dashboard regularly. As of the latest update on September 17th, a total of 1,182 positive student cases were identified from on-demand testing, with 424 awaiting results. An additional 189 positive cases were identified through random testing, with 471 awaiting results. It is important to note that these figures may vary from Department of Health numbers due to delays in reporting from the state. Penn State and the Department of Health have been working to establish some consistency in their reporting to avoid confusion and misinformation. As you know, the Big Ten elected to commence with the 2020-2021 college football season beginning October 24th. While no fans will be permitted to attend, local municipalities are working with the university to identify strategies to discourage and prohibit large on and off-campus congregations and tailgating. There's understandably been a great deal of concern and apprehension surrounding the swell of confirmed cases in the wake of the return of Penn State students. While the numbers are indeed alarming, it is important to note that the community understands the narrative behind the numbers. The university has an aggressive testing and contact tracing protocol that's captured a sample of the population that may have otherwise gone unnoticed and untested. The protocol has yielded a significant number of confirmed cases that exhibit very few symptoms or are entirely asymptomatic. While like most of the community, I am greatly concerned about the recent spike, I am also encouraged that proactive measures are in place to identify and quarantine students, faculty, and staff who test positive for the virus. I'd like to emphasize that concerned residents should monitor the public COVID-19 dashboard published by Penn State and to follow the Center Region Ready Facebook page for regular updates from our Regional Public Information Officer and the Queen of Bollesburg, Amy Farkas. Locally, operations have been unchanged, with road crews preparing for fall leaf collection and soon to be gearing up for winter operations. Township offices remain open between the hours of 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. Monday through Friday, and visitors are asked to observe masking and social distancing protocol, as well as to make use of the temporal thermometer that's located on the right side when you first enter the set of doors to the building. Chief Albright and I met with Commissioner Michael Pipe last week to identify a site for a ballot drop-off box for the upcoming election. The box will be located immediately outside the municipal building and will be placed in early October. The handling of mail-in ballots has been carefully defined by the commissioners and the county's election office, and voters can be confident that the use of the drop box will be safe and secure. Staff has closed the business needs survey, and I wish to express our appreciation to all those who participated. The results will be presented to the board at their upcoming meeting on October 5th, and staff is planning to address some of the concerns expressed by residents in the result and business owners in the results of the survey. That concludes my report. Thank you all for your patience and understanding as we navigate through this unprecedented crisis. I'll happily answer any questions from the board.
Thanks, Dave. Does anyone have any questions for Dave in the report? Lisa.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for the report, Dave. I just have a few questions. One is the task force with the county and state. I forget if you called it a task force. When can we expect to hear something about what they've come up with, what kinds of mitigation strategies they're going to put in place?
Good question. They're referring to it as a strike team.
Okay.
It's my understanding, and I asked this question at our Emergency Operations Center meeting late last week, that they will be working directly with the county. They will not be represented on the EOC itself, so we won't be able to get real-time updates, but presumably all of the updates on their actions and initiatives will be funneled through the county and ultimately get down through the municipalities via that chain of command. Centrise, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know you've kind of interacted a little bit on this front with the communications team. Do you have anything to add to that or any more clarification?
I don't have anything to add.
We'll stay on top of them and make sure that we're getting reports. Unfortunately, they don't seem like they're going to be a part of the local initiatives other than sort of through a proxy status through the county.
Okay, that's too bad since, the surge in cases is here. So I'm surprised that they didn't even want an emergency management representative, Sean Kaufman or somebody, to be present there. So, okay. Thanks for that. And then another question I had asked Steve to please ask at the next executive committee meeting to ask Penn State to please send someone to the next general forum meeting to be present to answer questions about football, preferably somebody in a decision-making position, or even better, maybe somebody who is going to be part of this coordination between Penn State and the municipalities. So do we have any information on what that coordination is yet? What's been happening or what's been planning to happen? Has any motion happened there at all?
I have not been part of any dialogue with the university or the athletics departments or department relative to the recommencing of the football season.
Okay.
We do have meetings with the university administration, their Office of Local Government Affairs, Sharimi Young and Zach Moore. Our next meeting is scheduled for tomorrow, so I can bring that forward to them and see if they can respond.
That would be helpful. And, I assume that, well, Sharima will be at the next meeting and possibly Zach Moore. But that's why I was wondering if somebody who has some specific information on what types of coordination they are expecting to do with the municipalities, because that seemed to be an emphasized point to help us, manage this. Okay, so thank you. So we'll see how that goes. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up, which is probably the most important, is that the Penn State football schedule has Ohio State at home on October 31st, which had been decided before would be the trick-or-treating night. So has any decision been made on changing that? Has any discussion happened? Or the previous schedule, from what I could tell, had an away game or a bye week on Halloween. So trick-or-treating was scheduled that night. I don't know if maybe Chris knows. Okay.
Yeah, Pam reached out to the Chiefs today, asking our opinions, whether it should be on the 31st or move it to another date. Since we have this opportunity here tonight, I'll listen to anybody's opinion on it and share that with the Pam as well. Great.
Traditionally we've moved it, not me personally, but, COG has moved it when it's been a home game. I expect this will have a lot of activity around it. So I don't know if Friday would be any better than Saturday. Probably it would be, but Thursday would be an option. People want to trick or treat, and neighborhoods will be doing this. So I think, and it can be done safely. There's a lot of talk about how this can be done safely and distanced and masked. And so I want to be supportive of that and just try to set up the best case, the best situation for this. So I don't know what everybody else thinks about that.
I guess I don't know that we'll be seeing the kind of traffic that we normally would, which has been the real reason all along we've changed this, because with so much traffic, it creates a hazard. And I think with no fan attendance at the game, even though we may have some people showing up just to be in town, I don't think we're going to see the kind of traffic that was a concern. But I don't have any objection to moving it either if people feel that.
I think the big unknown at this point, and this gets back to Ms. Strickland's point a moment ago, is one of the things we're wrestling with regionally is the uncertainty about what the commencing of the football season is going to mean with respect to congregations in town. Are people going to come to the State College area to tailgate, to have parties, to commiserate with the alumni and to kind of reconnect, even though they're not going to actually be attending the game and they're not going to be permitted to tailgate? That's a tricky one and very difficult to predict, because, and especially if you talk about big rivalry games like Ohio State, I think we really would be best suited to kind of monitor that. And if, just to be on the safe side, it supports rescheduling the trick or treat night, because you'll still have some of the shenanigans, even though it's not a game that people can come and tailgate and be in attendance for, that are associated with football weekends, like the drunk driving, like the, kind of late activities and parties and things like that. I agree that a lot of the reasoning behind rescheduling it in the past, when it's conflicted with a home football game, was because of the influx of traffic. But I think there may be some other concerns regarding public safety that are still applicable, even if we're not going to see this swell of people coming into town for game day.
I'm still not convinced that the games will be played. I mean, if COVID keeps upticking, there is a chance that they might not even play. So it's all a big question mark in my mind still.
What is the schedule? What are they talking about in terms of scheduling things for games? Like are the police like scheduling like normal for a game weekend? Is that how you're going to approach it? I mean, I think we're going to have a lot of people in town. Even if there's no tailgating around the stadium, I think we're going to see a lot of partying. But, you know, like what are you guys thinking in terms of postponing or changing the hours for trick or treat right now?
Right now for trick or treat, I mean, I think part of the big variable too is the time of the football game. I don't know whether this is going to be a 12 o'clock kick or afternoon or evening. So that's an issue that could kibosh a lot of our plans here. Some of the recommendations have been Friday night, which opens up the door to a state high football game. And then there's been discussion about Sunday. I'm not really in favor of Sunday. So if we were going to really push anything, I'd prefer Thursday or leave as is.
Mm-hmm. I would
Yeah,
agree with you between those two, either Thursday or leave as is. I think it's just so difficult to know how many people are going to come and what the atmosphere is going to be like. You know, the only thing we can kind of look at is Arts Festival, when a lot of people came, and as I've said to a couple people, there was literally nothing to see here and people still came. So, you know, I would expect people, and if the bars are closing at 11, they're going to be spreading out to the townships. So if I had to lean either way, I would lean toward rescheduling it till Thursday, just to prevent a cancellation of trick-or-treating. I just would not want to see that canceled because things were getting out of hand Friday or Saturday. So, but I haven't, you know, absolutely made up my mind. So.
All right. Well, what I'll do then, if there's no other consent or no other real discussion, what I'll do is I'll recommend Thursday. If there's big pushback on Thursday, I'll say we stay with Saturday and then leave Sunday as the rain date. How's that sound?
I think that sounds fair. I don't know what everybody else thinks.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. Also, just wanted to say that because we have set up the process where the chiefs will make the decision on this, if anyone has any comments as we go forward, if you could get them to Chris, that would be good, because that is our process now for making the change. So
do you think we would, so the police would change this? We wouldn't re-vote on this at the general forum?
that's my understanding, because we decided that because it is the public safety question, that it really should go there.
Right. Okay. I'm just wondering when we can tell people to expect a decision. This is a hot topic. Just saying.
That's a good question about when to expect a decision. But yeah, we made that process last year because of the weather issue or something.
Mm-hmm.
So what's our timeline for telling the public?
I'll notify Pam tomorrow, and I guess we'll just wait for a consensus from Chief Jolly and Chief Gardner from State College, and then forward everything to Pam, and then she'll let us know as soon as we need to get the message out.
Great. Thanks so much, Chris.
And before we move on from this, I just wanted to ask the board, with Lisa's recommendation as far as requesting that someone from the university administration should come to the general forum meeting, do I have essentially board consensus that that's a good idea? That way I can present it tomorrow at the executive session as a board request instead of just an individual request.
Yes.
Thank
Okay,
you.
looks like we have consensus. So I'll take that to executive session tomorrow as a request from the board.
Thank you.
Okay.
I
other
have one
questions today?
follow-up with,
Laura.
sorry, Steve. Thanks. With Dave, with your report, I wanted to mention something I'm interested in regard to the numbers that were being given by Penn State is the the difference, well, I don't know the difference between isolation and quarantine. And I'd be interested in having the numbers of like what percent of their on-campus isolation is dedicated to off-campus students, and if that is full. So the reason for that is, my interest is that when an off-campus student is denied that isolation space on campus, they're kind of left to their own devices in terms of isolating. And so you have different students have different kinds of resources available to them and have different kinds of living situations. And so you can kind of see how them not having that available to them could impact both them and the community. So it's the
Sure.
number I'm interested in.
I can ask on the number. They are permitted off-campus students to take advantage of the on-campus quarantining and isolation areas, but they're also given the option to elect to quarantine at home or in their off-campus residence. As I understand it, many of them elect to do that because they prefer to be in their off-campus apartments. I could see if I could get some specific numbers in terms of how many are, opting to quarantine using the university's quarters. And
That'd be great. Because my
understanding.
understanding is that some off-campus students have been turned away from that on-campus housing because they've been told their off-campus allocation of spots has been maxed out. And so I'm sure that that changes over time depending on where the infection is, but it's just another way to understand that. So I'd be glad to be wrong about that, but that's my understanding from a student.
Sure. That was not what I had heard from university officials last week, but I will follow up and confirm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, then we'll move on to the next item, which is a report on the crisis intervention training from Tracy Small, Center County CIT Coordinator.
Good evening, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, good. Thank you for this opportunity to meet with all of you and talk a little bit about what our crisis intervention team is and does. I have a lot of statistics to go over, and hopefully by the end of the presentation, you guys will have the experts in the crisis intervention team. So I'm going to try to share my screen. This is the first time I've really done this. And I need to back up to here. And okay, is everyone seeing that okay? We got a thumbs up from Dave.
Yes. Yep.
Awesome. All right, so Center County CIT stands for Crisis Intervention Team. And again, I'm Tracy Small, I'm the CIT coordinator. I've been in this role since CIT started in January of 2011, so almost 10 years I'm in this role as the coordinator. Before we actually start with CIT, I thought it might be helpful to kind of go over the Mental Health Procedures Act. I am going to try to go through this as quickly as possible because I know you guys have a pretty hefty agenda ahead of you. And any questions that we have, I'm happy to answer at the end. But a lot of what police do and a lot of what happens with CIT is guided by the Mental Health Procedures Act. So I thought it would make sense to take a few minutes to go over that. The Mental Health Procedures Act was established in 1976 to replace Section 4 of the MHID, which stands for Mental Health Intellectual Disabilities Act of 1966. So as you can see, it's pretty antiquated. It has not been updated in many, many years. And it dictates the standards for a voluntary and an involuntary treatment. So you may hear me reference a 201, which is a voluntary, and a 302. And that is the dictation for the people with serious mental illness. So the voluntary commitment, the 201 section, it's pretty cut and dry. It's the least restrictive and most preferred method to help get people into mental health treatment. The person themselves agrees to a mental health evaluation and signs themselves into the hospital. There's no mental health warrant involved. There's no mental health delegate. which in our case in Center County, this has just changed this past year in 2020, where Service Access Management Incorporated, or SAM Inc., has taken over as the role of the delegate. There's no warrant, no delegate involved, and the doctor at the hospital may release that person at any time. And in this situation, the role of law enforcement would be maybe someone calls 911 and they say that they're feeling suicidal, and law enforcement will respond, talk to that person, let them know the resources that we have in our community, and help them maybe get to the hospital if that's where they need to go. Or we also have another new service in Center County, which is the Center for Community Resources, or CCR. And they're a walk-in crisis center, and they are open 24/7. They just opened in late December of 2019, so they can help them get there. So that's really a pretty simple, most preferred way of getting someone some treatment. And then we get into what is, a little more complicated, which is the involuntary commitment. I think everybody's probably heard of 302. That's a pretty common term. And this is where someone with firsthand information petitions to have someone evaluated. The behaviors in the last 30 days are admissible on the petition. So if someone saw something or heard something within the last 30 days, they could complete this petition and have a mental health delegate, which again is SAM Incorporated, review the petition, and then that person will either approve or deny a warrant. If the warrant is approved, the police will be involved and they will be asked to take that person to the hospital. And a medical doctor at that point in time will be the one to evaluate and make the decision as to whether or not to uphold or deny the petition. So there's a lot of stakeholders involved when it comes to a 302 situation. If the petition is upheld, the person will be placed in a psychiatric hospital for no more than 120 hours, which is 5 days. So again, the role of law enforcement in this situation is, if it's here in Ferguson Township, they will get faxed a copy of the warrant with specific information on, who the person is, what the situation involves, and then they go out to serve that warrant. So it's a little more tricky because you've got people who, maybe don't see that they need some psychiatric intervention. They're not able to determine that, or they just don't want the help to begin with. So it does create a little bit more of a tricky situation. The criteria for 302 is the person must be a clear and present danger to themselves. So they have to have verbalized a suicidal ideation, and they have the intent or means to follow through with their plan, or they are a clear and present danger to others. Sometimes we see both, someone who's a danger to themselves and to others. So they are having homicidal thoughts, and they also have the intent or means to likely follow through with that and repeat the behavior. The third one, a little more tricky again, is someone who's unable or refuses to care for themselves. And in these situations, what we're looking for is that there's a reasonable probability that death or serious bodily injury or physical debilitation will ensue within 30 days. So this might be a situation where you have somebody maybe with paranoid schizophrenia who is not taking care of themselves, and their hygiene gets to the point where they are at risk of becoming they're at risk of dying or having serious bodily injury. And these, really important to note, all of these must be due to a mental illness and not to an intellectual disability, drug or alcohol dependence, or dementia in the absence of a co-occurring mental health disorder. So somebody could have dementia, but they also have to have a co-occurring mental health disorder in order for these criteria to be met. All the persons participating in the Commitment Procedure Act are immune from civil and criminal liability unless the petitioner provides false information intentionally. So this is the reason that we have a delegate involved, is you don't want, let's say there's a bad marriage and, the husband is saying that the wife is incapable of caring for their children and completes a petition to say that he doesn't believe that she should have custody of the children because she's a bad parent. So the whole role of the delegate is to kind of rule out any of those sort of, malicious petitions. At the end of a 302, if it is upheld, the 120 hours, one of three outcomes may occur. The person may go for a voluntary admission. So they may say, I think I need a little more treatment. And the physician would be the one who would determine that and agree with that. They can be discharged from the treatment facility. In our case, it's Mount Nittany Medical Center is usually the treatment facility. They have a psychiatric unit there. It's not always that unit, but, and I can tell you that their beds are always full at Mount Nittany, or they will be pursued a further commitment if that is indicated. So that would be, getting more people involved in the treatment team, and it would then move on to what's called a 303, which would be up to another 21 days. And then after that, it could turn into a 304, which could be up to 90 days in inpatient. So it's a whole procedure that they go through, but the first one that we start with is the 302. So again, in Center County, SAM Inc. acts as the delegate. The role of the delegate is to collect those petitioning statements from the person who saw the behavior or heard the statements. They do respond to the emergency room to provide the relevant information to the physician in order for him or her to complete the mental health evaluation and determine the commitment. They look at the 302 paperwork. Sometimes they themselves may complete the 302. If the 302 is upheld, they are responsible for finding placement for individuals in an acute psychiatric hospital, which again, we like to keep people who are local as we can. So Mount Nittany does have their psychiatric unit. We also have the Meadows. And I will tell you that a lot of times those beds are full. So then they have to start looking outside of Center County, Du Bois and other areas. And recently we just had a 302 that Sam had worked all weekend to try to find placement for this individual across the entire state of Pennsylvania and even into the state of New Jersey with no luck in finding them a bed. So it is a real issue and a real concern everywhere. They're also responsible for securing the belongings of the individual. If they have pets, if they have children, a car, those types of things, the delegate is responsible for that as well. They do present them their rights under the 302. And then if the 302 would be denied by the physician, at that point in time, the person is offered voluntary services and to return to a location within reason. So again, the 201 is the most preferred. The 302 is a little more tricky. Okay, I kind of buzzed right through that. So we'll move into CIT while we're here. So just a little bit about the history of CIT. It was started in 1988 by the Memphis Police Department, and they were joined in partnership with the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI, local mental health providers, University of Memphis and the University of Tennessee, in organizing a training and implementing a specialized unit of police officers. It was established because, like many police departments across the country, they saw an increase in the number of mental health related calls that police were responding to. And I should also note too, I don't have it in here, but just an interesting statistic is that about 1 in 5 individuals are have a mental health condition, a mental health diagnosis. Not necessarily a serious mental illness, but 1 in 5 people do leave a doctor's office with some sort of mental health diagnosis. And that, I've heard, has been, on the verge of maybe 1 in 4 people. And given the way things are in today's society with a lot of increase in anxiety and depression, it wouldn't surprise me if we would see more people with those diagnoses. Okay. My screen is frozen. There we go. The CIT training schedule is flexible, and it's based on the needs of each community and the core elements that are set forth by the CIT Memphis model. And I did put a link up there if anyone's interested in finding out more about CIT and Memphis and how it started. Feel free to look that up. But the reason that the schedule is flexible is because every community is different. Every community has different needs. Every community has different resources. And CIT is a resource-driven program. So we can't take our CIT program and make it work, say, in Blair County, because their resources are different than what we have. So it is a community partnership of mental health professionals, law enforcement officers and first responders, individuals who live with a mental illness, family members, and advocates. So it's everyone kind of coming together and agreeing on what is going to be best for the community. It's also a jail diversion program. So instead of seeing someone who has a mental illness and taking them to jail instead of to a treatment facility, that was one of the things that Memphis was seeing as well, is that they didn't know what to do with these individuals when they were encountering them. So a lot of times they ended up going to jail. So it is designed to improve the outcomes of the police interactions with individuals whose behaviors are influenced by mental illness or substance use, an intellectual disability, or any related condition. This is a lot of goals and outcomes, but really the overall goal is to help officers understand and treat mental illness as a disease and not a crime. So for first responders, the hope is to decrease the number of injuries to the officer, decrease the use of force, improve use of alternatives to arrest and incarceration, decrease the amount of time that officers are spending in a crisis unit or the emergency room, reduce myths and stigma of mental illness among law enforcement, improve relationships for officers and the community. For the mental health system, the goals are to extend the crisis response system, increase opportunity for earlier intervention, and improve treatment outcomes. And I can tell you that we, in the past 10 years, and I'm sure Chief Albright would agree since he's been in law enforcement for a period of time, where we used to run into issues with mental health, saying that they maybe can't tell us certain information because of HIPAA or whatever. We've really kind of knocked down those walls and built bridges because both systems understand that it's really important that we have that collaboration and that communication. For individuals and family members of the person with the mental health condition, it decreases the number of injuries to the individual in crisis. It creates better relationships between the individual in crisis and law enforcement, improves access to treatment, and increases the chance that the individual will receive continuous care. And why did we start it in Center County? For the same reasons really that we started in Memphis is we saw an increase in the number of mental health related calls that were dispatched to police. Again, we saw that limited communication between law enforcement and mental health, and officers just, in general, having a lack of understanding of mental health and the behaviors that they would see and how that can relate to their mental illness and not treating it as a crime. And also the available mental health resources and services that we have in our area. So just a quick timeline of where we started. In April of 2010, there were 8 people who went to the Laurel Highlands CIT program. 2 of the 4 police officers were actually Ferguson Township police officers who had gone. The other officer was from State College, and there was one from Penn State. There were 2 corrections officers from our local jail and 2 mental health specialists. And they all received the 40-hour training certificate and the train the trainer training, so they could come back to Center County and start our program here. So in 2010, after they had gone to training, they developed a steering committee and they applied for and received a grant from the PCCD, the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. And by January of 2011, they had held their first training with 21 graduates. In October of 2016, we had a couple grants that were in there that we had applied for and received to keep the program sustained, and my position sustained as well. And in October of 2016, county government, as well as the 6 local police departments, that being Ferguson Township, Patton Township, Penn State, State College, Bellefonte, and Spring Township, all agreed that this was working and it was beneficial to our community, and decided to come together with finances and sustain the program that way.
Tonight's just going to be in the 30th.
I'm going to just kind of go over these real quick. I'm not going to belabor them, just to give you an idea of who all we have trained in the last 10 years. The departments that you see in white are the local partnerships that we have. The ones that you see in blue are people who have actually reached out to us and said, we would like to come to your training program so we can start CIT in our area. So as you can see, we've trained quite a few people local. We were pretty excited a couple of years ago to actually get the buy-in finally from the state police locally because they do cover such a large area of our rural Center County. So we have them on board now as well as the other police departments that you see. Again, sheriff's departments and jails that we've trained, our local sheriff's office, our local jail. We've had 1 or 2 people from SCI Rockview who have gone through, and we've actually had people from as far away as Loudoun County, Virginia, who have come all the way up here to receive our training. And many more. And again, I'm not going to go over it, but we like to cover the whole spectrum of first responders. So we have Center County Emergency Communications, our 911 center. The dispatchers there have been through training. Probation and parole. We've had some magisterial district judges, the youth center, MHID, EI, and DNA stands for mental health, intellectual disability, early intervention, and drug and alcohol. They're all lumped under one umbrella in our county. We've had several EMS companies who have gone through, as well as security at the hospital, and then the Center for Community Resources. We do open it up because they do provide mobile crisis training. So a lot of times they will respond with police. So again, in order to build that partnership, we want to have that collaboration of, people who are actually on the mental health side of things working directly with police. So they all receive the same training. And again, a whole bunch more in blue of different areas that we've trained. Some of our statistics, just how many people we've trained every year. You'll notice that this year we are only at 19. We usually hold 2 trainings a year, one in January and one in June. We had to cancel our June training because of COVID, but we are hopefully, tentatively, going to be scheduling our next full training in January 2021. So there are 384 people that have been trained in Center County. The comprehensive training emphasizes mental health related topics, crisis resolution skills, and verbal de-escalation training. Those are the biggies, and the access to community-based services. I'm gonna skip the rest of this. We do scenarios at the end of the week. I think the slide that most of you would be interested in are like what specifically we train on. So this is sort of a layout of our 40-hour week. And we don't, and I'm pleased to say that Dave and Chief Albright both have completed CIT training. So they can be the first to tell you that it is a full 40 hours. We don't even let them leave for lunch, which they don't like that. So we have them here at the township from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. So it is a packed week. But we start our week out talking about clinical issues. What are mental health diagnoses? What is schizophrenia? What is depression? We go over a whole bunch of the common mental health diagnoses that police are likely to encounter. And then we move into psychopharmacology. So what is some of the medical, medications that people take who have a mental illness? A lot of times an officer will encounter someone and they might say that they're on a certain medication. So that might ring a bell from, learning about that in CIT training. We oftentimes see people who have co-occurring disorder. So they not only have a mental health condition, but they also have a substance use disorder as well. So we train on that as well. And then we do specialized populations, talk about adolescents, we talk about senior citizens, and developmental and intellectual disabilities. And then we have a company called PeerStar who comes in and they do a simulation on hearing voices. So everyone gets an MP3 player. And in that MP3 player, they're hearing different voices, and they're asked to do different tasks, performing a job interview, going about things that you would normally do day to day, but experiencing what it's like to have those auditory hallucinations. The advocacy perspective, so we hear from individuals who have a mental health diagnosis, and we also hear from family members of those who have a mental health diagnosis. We do spend some time talking about cultural diversity, suicide prevention and intervention, the Mental Health Procedures Act that I just went over with all of you, 302 warrants, how to complete the 302 paperwork, CIT policies and procedures, verbal de-escalation. That's really kind of where we get into what we call the meat and potatoes of training, because that is really what CIT is all about, is being able to verbally talk someone down. And then we spend a deal of time talking about military culture and post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as hearing from some veterans who are also in law enforcement and have post-traumatic stress. And then we spend a period of time also talking about autism spectrum disorder. We found a really great presenter for that a couple of years ago. And we also talk about suicide by cop and officer suicide, because those rates are always increasing every year. And we focus on critical incident stress management. So if there would ever be a serious critical incident in our area, officers know, who we can call to kind of come in as a team to respond to those types of incidents. And then a lot of community resources. We actually have field trip day is what they call it, where we actually go out and see where folks in the community are living, where they're working on some of their psychiatric rehab. And that gives officers the opportunity to engage with people who have a mental health diagnosis, to ask them questions and to allow the people who have the mental health condition to ask questions of the officers. So it really opens up that communication. And then we end our week with scenario-based skill training, which at the end, when I'm done talking here, I'm going to kind of walk you through what we would actually maybe play out in class, just so you have an idea of what that looks like. And that is really our week. It's packed pretty full. So CIT in Center County, my job is to schedule the biannual trainings as well as refresher trainings. And lately we've been having those refresher trainings during, a lot of them are held during police in-service every year in January and February. So after police have an interaction with someone who has a mental health diagnosis, or anybody who, they suspect may have a mental health diagnosis, they complete a crisis referral form and they submit that to myself. And then I will provide outreach to any necessary providers. So if that person, if they're open with the mental health office for some sort of case management, maybe they're open with Strawberry Fields for case management, we'll make sure that the case managers are made aware that this person had an interaction with law enforcement, because we really want to turn that over to the mental health professionals who should be interacting with these folks and take that responsibility off police. So these are just some examples of, people that we follow up with. The Center for Community Resources, again, they have the walk-in center. Veterans Affairs, if the person is a veteran and wants to be connected to services. If they're over the age of 60, we will refer them to Office of Aging. Penn State, if they're a student and there's a serious incident that happens off campus, notifying Penn State police that this person, has a mental health condition, and this is what happened with their interaction with police, maybe in Ferguson Township. The correctional facility, because sometimes people do end up going to jail. So we will let them know what happened in the community that led that person to the jail. And then the school districts too, if there are school-aged children that are involved, the school resource officers have been instrumental in getting those reports. And then the service providers will offer outreach and follow up to the person who had the interaction with police. And if needed, they will provide any follow-up information either to myself directly or to the police department directly. Some statistics. So again, we've been doing CIT training and collecting data since January 1st of 2011, so almost 10 years. And I do my data collection on a quarterly basis, so I will be doing my next round here in a few days. So we went through June 30th for tonight's purposes. And as of June 30th, I had received a total of 3,722 crisis referrals. 1,021 of those, or 27%, have been from Ferguson Township Police Department. And just to kind of give you a breakdown of how many of those we had been receiving on a monthly basis versus how many of them, you can see in these most recent years, we're starting to see. So, where we used to see not even maybe one a day, now we're seeing sometimes, an average of 2 referrals a day. Whether or not that is because there's more mental health, because people are more open to talking about it, that could be part of it. Whether it's because we have almost 100% of police departments trained, could be part of that reason too. But it really kind of gives us an accurate picture of, what's going on in Center County. In 2020, we did see a little bit of a drop off, but I will tell you without a doubt that incidents are starting to pick up again, particularly now that Penn State students are back. We have seen, more and more people that have been seen by police for crises. So 56% of them, the majority of them, have been male, 44 have been female. This is of the total report that I had given you, the 3,700 number. 2,700 or 73% have been Caucasian, 9% have been African American, 6% have been Asian American, 4% Latinx, less than 1% Middle Eastern. And on the reports, sometimes it's not identified what nationality or race the person identifies as. So there have been 8% of those that it was not specified on the report. 77 of them, which is only 2%, I say only 2% because that's really, compared to the national average, is pretty low. But only 2% of them have been ended up being arrested or taken to jail. 14 of them have resulted in injuries to officers. 6 have resulted in injuries to the individual. 1,372 have involved someone who has either threatened suicide or have actually made an attempt. 8% have been threats made to others. 11% have involved weapons of some type. Typically, those are weapons you'll see kind of hand in hand with someone who has attempted suicide. You may see that there's a knife or a razor or something along those lines involved. And 19% have involved substance use. 23% have involved some sort of mobile crisis. It used to be Can Help. I think people are probably somewhat familiar with that term. Can Help is no more. Now it's the Center for Community Resources. So we broadly call it mobile crisis. 36% had gone to Mount Nittany to have the mental health evaluation. And I'm in the process now of kind of really digging deeper into this data because we do have 10 years of data to really kind of sift through. And I just got done kind of figuring out how many have been going on a voluntary basis on that 201, and that's 68%. So the majority of people are going to the hospital because they want to go, versus 32% have been involuntary. 27% have involved Penn State students. And I will tell you, when we first started collecting data, that was more like 19%. So we've definitely seen a jump in the number of Penn State students who have, been in crisis over the years. 3% have involved veterans, 7 have involved juveniles, and 7 have involved individuals who are homeless. So I just kind of wanted to walk you guys through one of the scenarios that we would do. We would typically act these out, but for tonight's purposes, just to kind of walk you through, a scenario that police could respond to. So a neighbor calls 911. It's 2 a.m. She's upset because her upstairs neighbor is playing loud music and is stomping and yelling. So police get dispatched to this call. Typically, I think in a college town, at 2 a.m, when you hear that kind of thing, as a police officer, you're going to assume that you're going to a party. So you may, kind of plan out in your mind, you might be issuing some citations, breaking up a party. But when the officer actually gets there and interacts with the person, they find that it's a middle-aged man who lives alone, and he's in obvious distress. He's maybe rocking back and forth. He's yelling at someone that the officer can't see, and he's stomping. And it's just, that officer then finds him or herself right smack dab in the middle of a mental health crisis. So this is why CIT is so important, because that officer needs to know, what do I do? So through some questions that they will learn in CIT training, the officer is able to determine that, this individual is somebody who is having auditory and visual hallucinations, and they're playing loud music to drown out the voices that they're hearing, and they're stomping because they're seeing bugs on their floor, which aren't really there, and they're just very distressed. And so that officer then has to interact with that person, de-escalate them, and then refer them somewhere. They could always tell them to, turn the music down. I don't want to have to come back. And that's a perfectly acceptable response. And most police would probably do that. And if the person complies, great. But the chances are that officers are going to be called back because the real issue hasn't been addressed, and that's that person's mental health. So a good CIT officer is going to try to talk that person into maybe going to the hospital, or maybe going to the crisis walk-in center, or maybe having a mobile crisis worker come out to that person's home to meet with them there. So this is where it's kind of a song and dance, and you kind of have to, we tell officers all the time, hooks and barbs. You may throw an idea out there and that person may say, absolutely not. I hate the hospital. I've been there. I don't want to go back. But you may be able to say, we have this new walk-in center. Would you be willing to, go there? And if the person agrees, then that's great. Then that officer can do what we call a warm handoff to whoever is, willing to accept this person to help them. So that's just kind of a quick, we would normally act that out in class, but just to give you an idea of how these calls come through. A lot of times they're not dispatched as a clear-cut mental health call. It comes through as a loud noise complaint, or it could be a traffic stop. It could be, anything really. It's not necessarily identified as a mental health call. So in summary, if you or someone you know is experiencing a mental or emotional health crisis, you can call 911 and ask for a CIT officer to respond. Every time we have a training, our dispatch center gets an updated list of all the officers who have been trained. So they're aware of what officers are on duty in what jurisdiction, and they can dispatch a CIT trained officer. My number is up there and my email as well, if anybody has any follow-up questions. If not, I'll entertain any questions anyone may have.
Are there any questions for Tracy?
No, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you all too. I know some of you have been on the board for quite some time, and I have been housed here at Ferguson Township since I started back in 2011. And it's really been a great place for me to be because I do work right next to Chief Albright. And there's many times when I have questions about, the law or law enforcement, and I can go to him, and vice versa. He knows that he and his officers can come to me at any time, and we'll try to work through, whatever issues there are. So I appreciate you allowing me to use the township facilities when we have our trainings, as well as being housed here at the township.
And I'll just point out, I can't see everybody, so if somebody has something, just speak up and Oh,
Steve.
thanks. Okay, Prasenjit, did you have a question or?
No, I was just
Oh, okay.
putting up
Just
the
check.
applaud sign.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, and I'm just done
Wes
something.
has a question.
Looks like Wes, yeah.
Yeah, Wes, could you go ahead? I'm not seeing everybody again, so.
Can you hear me, Tracy?
I can.
Okay, I was wondering when you started talking about the 302, how do the circumstances, because they get more involved, who pays for them?
I didn't hear quite all of that. It was a little bit broken up.
Okay, starting with the 302s,
Uh-huh.
how do they get paid for?
You mean if someone were to be hospitalized as a result?
Sure.
That would depend on the insurance. I think that's part of the delegate's responsibility is to work with insurance and find, a place that would accept their insurance. But typically it would go through that. If not, I think the county mental health has some funds that they can kick in, but it's typically, the person's insurance that would cover that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Tracy. I
Thank you,
appreciate
guys. Have a good night.
the question. Okay, the next item on the agenda is under unfinished business, a public hearing on a temporary emergency ordinance of the Township of Ferguson in Center County, Pennsylvania, requiring the wearing of face coverings and implementing additional regulations to reduce the risk of transmission of the COVID-19 virus.
Thank you. Provided with your agenda this evening is a copy of the temporary emergency ordinance that's been advertised for public hearing. It prescribes additional regulations and restrictions relative to the enforcement of public health and safety protocol in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The board had a chance to review the draft ordinance at its regular meeting on Tuesday, September 8th, and elected to continue the public hearing to reflect some revisions that were offered by the board that evening. Included with the revisions are additional restrictions on gathering sizes, both indoor and outdoor, limitations or exemptions rather for those restrictions on gathering sizes, and then some additional language for clarification that the board directed to include in the draft. Lastly, there's a 5-day time delay that's been worked into the ordinance to allow for any gatherings or communities or community get-togethers or organizations to reschedule or to modify their plan to move ahead. So under the proposal and under the ordinance that's been advertised, if adopted, the ordinance would be effective on Saturday, September 26th. So if the board were interested in pursuing that, there'd be really two actions requested. The first would be to adopt the ordinance as drafted, and then secondly, to extend the imposition or the enforcement of the current ordinance that's in place through that time frame, because under the board's most recent action, that is set to expire at 12:01 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Thank you, Dave. Dave said the ordinance as advertised is attached in the agenda packet. So this is a public hearing. So I'll start if there are any questions or comments from the public to the board. Looks like Dorothy has a.
Hi, Dorothy Blair, president of Netney Valley Environmental Coalition. I wanted to thank you. I really wanted to thank you for including gathering limits. That was what we tried to do, and you did it, and I thank you. I have, though, somebody who would like stronger gathering limits. You all know Pam Steckler, right? And she couldn't come to the meeting, so she texted me something to say, and I promised her I'd say it, unless Wes is going to do it. Are you going to do it, Wes? Well, they're not. He's not.
No.
Okay. Hold on a second. My phone always makes me go back to my entering my passcode. I'm sorry. Okay. She wants to contact you so you can express her particular point of view, because she lives right at the edge of the borough and Ferguson, and she has existing conditions. She's very fearful about the situation. She's surrounded by students, and she would like, her feelings are still that 25 indoors and 50 outdoors is far too many on a regular basis. I am afraid things will be ramping up here in terms of numbers of cases, not lessening, she says. Therefore, it makes sense to limit residential to 10 indoors and 25 outdoors. We think this is very reasonable. If you feel you want to leave possibilities for exemptions to 25/50 passed by the board, that would seem to cover things like weddings and the like. But parties on an everyday basis should have no need to be that large in this dangerous time. And that's what she wanted me to convey to you, and I said I would. She feels that, I think in her area of Ferguson Township, she is at a lot of risk, and I know that for a fact. So there are people who cannot be satisfied with a larger gathering size, and I just wanted to state that. And I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to give this spiel for Pam. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who wanted to address the board on this matter? Okay. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and open up to a motion to begin with.
Dave Stone is gone.
No, Dave Stone is, I don't know if he's there.
Oh.
Maybe he is.
Hey, this is
Yeah, I
Dave
thought he
Stone. Can you
was,
hear?
yeah.
Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I had my hand up. I was going to testify during the public hearing.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I guess you didn't see it. So yeah, I just want to also thank you very much for making the shift last time, and it's a good start. I do kind of agree that you may want to look at lower limits later. I know College Township has passed or is about to pass something, and they also are open to being flexible. So it may turn out that as we get to the end of October and the football season starts, you may want to look at that, given that off-campus parties are probably the biggest challenge we're going to face, not only here, but also you may find that people are leaving other jurisdictions to find locations where they can have larger parties. I don't know. I do feel a little bit, you might want to look at that language you have with the gatherings where you open the door to somebody getting pre-approval. I know that there was language thrown about in earlier discussions at other townships, which said, upon submission of a suitable COVID mitigation plan or something like that. I think that would provide the bona fides of the person hosting the event that they were serious, and at least they would have to give you something to say, look, we're going to do social distancing, we're going to do masking, and just generally, I would really advise you to take a look at that last meeting in college, where they dealt a lot of these issues in light of the court decision, the federal court decision, which makes it so important that local municipalities do the kind of thing you're going to do tonight, which is, to use your local authority, which really the state, at least the governor and the health department on its own may not have, depending how the courts rule on this, but clearly local municipalities do. So thank you very much. And I'll end with that. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll check again for any other comments.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I should express that I was contacted this week by a resident in the Overlook Heights neighborhood who requested that the board consider implementing additional restrictions on the occupancy limits for restaurants. As you may know, that's set to go in at 50% capacity, permitted at 50% capacity. This resident requested that the board consider reducing that to 25% capacity.
Thank you. So I guess now I'd like to have a motion. If we, any changes further on, we can make an amendment, but if we get a motion for the document as presented.
I, Laura, move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the temporary emergency ordinance requiring the wearing of face coverings and implementing additional regulations to reduce the risk of transmission of the COVID-19 virus.
Send it second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. As normal for public hearings where the ordinance has been advertised, if we make any significant changes tonight, we would have to re-advertise at a later meeting. If not, then we can vote on the motion tonight. So with that, I would open to any comments or questions or motions to make any amendments.
Steve, sorry, Lisa.
Oh.
Go ahead.
I have a really quick question. Just on section 5, item C. I think this language is similar to what's in some other municipalities' ordinances. I just wondered if you could clarify gatherings at or in Ferguson Township public parks and other municipal property. Should that say outdoors, or what does that mean? Other municipal property, more than 50 persons shall be prohibited.
The intent was for it to be outdoor congregations. They're really, for our purposes, parks are really going to be moved. We're not having gatherings at the municipal building outdoors for any reason. So aside from parks, there wouldn't be much application. It's just kind of consistent with the language that's in other regional ordinances.
Okay.
Hey, Laura, you had something?
Well, yeah, I guess, last time we talked about aligning our ordinance with other municipalities. And so I was following the College Township dialogue after that wrestling event. And they have different language in their ordinance. So for their indoor gathering, I think they have like a percentage of fire code occupancy. It doesn't have like a straight up number. It has a percentage of their regular occupancy. And then, so I'm not necessarily advocating that we should do that. I just wanted us to know collectively as a group that that's a really different way of assessing maximum number of people in a place. And I think ours is different, right? That way?
It's different, yeah. College Township's enacted slightly modified language. I think there's concerns that I would have about enforcement and implementation of that kind of provision, as opposed to a uniform requirement that applies to all township establishments. If the department or codes or whomever is being tasked with enforcement has to calculate a percentage of maximum allowable occupancy, not only is that difficult to enforce, but it's also it can be cumbersome for a property owner to calculate, quite frankly. So I would suggest that we have uniform provisions, but it's of course up to the board.
That makes sense. The one thing I did like about what they did is they added in a clause that would deal with situations like that wrestling tournament. So I had emailed the board the ordinance that they had enacted, and the language that they added. See if I can find it here. Is they added a section called hosting of events, and then any host found to be in violation of section 6, that hosting of events section, shall be found guilty of a civil infraction punishable by a base fine of $1,000 for each violation and an additional fine equivalent to the ticketing or entrance fee charged for each individual beyond the gathering limit. So that way, that $300 fine or whatever it is, it would then in addition have for every person admitted to the event over the gathering size limit, there would be an additional that amount of fine that would be due to the township. So I think like you're more punitive of a gathering that has 500 people more than they're allowed to have versus a gathering size that has just 5 people more. So that is what they decided to do in response to that wrestling tournament that was really out of hand out there. And so I would certainly be open to adding those 2 sections into our ordinance. So we have some ability to levy appropriate fines if there were thousands over the limit kind of a gathering situation.
And that was for events, right? For special events.
Yes.
So I would always thinking, and people on the board know more than me about what procedurally makes more sense, just so that we do not have the emergency ordinance that's already there extended for another 2 weeks. I would possibly pass this one with some small edits if required, so that it doesn't need to be re-advertised and gets into effect right now. And then work on another amendment to that, which takes into account the issue that Supervisor Dinini highlighted, which I fully support. I also support lowering the numbers to 10 indoors and 25 outdoors as requested by Ms. Pam Steckler and a few others. But that also depends upon what the rest of the board wants to do and as a future amendment.
Yeah, I would agree with Prasenjit that I would prefer to just go ahead and pass this ordinance as written and then do another public hearing later for any amendments to it. Would that work for you, Dave? Or does that seem like a good approach on it? Or
You certainly could. I mean, I would ask that the board consider the conditions that College Township was working to address and whether they're applicable in Ferguson Township. Meaning, I don't know that we have the same venue that they had to contend with at the C3 Sports venue that would support such a large indoor event. I appreciate their intention to scale the magnitude of the fine based on the, I guess, egregiousness of the infraction, but I just don't know that we would necessarily be faced with that same condition, that same circumstance in any venue that I can think of in Ferguson Township.
Yeah, that's a good point, Dave. I'm not really in that scene, so I don't know. Nothing pops to mind though.
yeah,
I mean, they got burned and it was really unfortunate. And, I hope that, as we all do, that it was not the, kind of proverbial super spreader event that we're all very concerned about. And so, I certainly understand their, desire to be more heavy handed and to prevent something like that from occurring again. And I think if we had a similar, venue or similar circumstance in our municipal borders, I would probably be cheerleading that same kind of restriction or that same kind of measure. But I can't really think of an example that would accommodate that kind of a crowd in Ferguson Township. But we could certainly include it. I just don't know that it would ever become an issue.
Well, I'm all for expediency and getting whatever we have on the books.
I would agree with that. And then to maybe look further into any potential for Ferguson to have an event like that. Like you, I can't think of a facility that wouldn't fall under an exemption for school or whatever. So yeah, we could continue looking, but I agree with Prasenjit to go ahead with this evening.
And I have a small maybe amendment if people agree after the discussion. So 3A, we put in personal private vehicles and resident private dwellings. So there is a chance of that being misinterpreted as, private dwellings where people are living are resident private dwellings. So if the language can or should be clarified as in residents in their own private dwellings, that at least I thought I would make that point while we are crafting the ordinance, so that if there is any ambiguity about the interpretation, then this will at least be on record that we mean private, residents while in their own private dwellings.
Yeah, there was, that's in 3A, right, Prasenjit?
Yep.
Yeah, it's resident apostrophe S, residents private dwellings. So dwellings of the resident. And I think we should add it. I do think it's just a typo, but it's a typo that has meaning.
And I think the change is small enough that we wouldn't have to, I don't even think we need a motion for it. I think it's just a correction to the wording.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because that is
Yeah.
consistent with the discussion we had.
I think we can modify that. I don't know if that addresses Mr. Mitra's concern.
Well, I would still prefer residents in their own private dwellings, but I'll go with apostrophe S if that's less trouble.
Well, I'm fine with Prasenjit's correction. It is definitely what the intent was when we discussed it and kind of made the
Yeah,
change.
I think that's enough of a change that we should have a motion for it then. I don't think it would require us to reschedule the vote, but I think
Okay.
there should be a person to make the change.
Okay.
Okay, I will move that we change 3A to say in personal private vehicles and residents while in their own private dwellings.
Second from Lara.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second for the amendment. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. There any other discussion on the original amendment to pass the ordinance? Okay, seeing none, this would be a roll call vote, Dave.
That is correct. This is presented as ordinance 1060. Ms. Danini,
Yes, sorry.
Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Mitra,
Yes.
Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Strickland.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries.
And may I ask if the board is willing to introduce a motion to extend the current emergency ordinance through, I guess, 12:01 a.m., September 26th?
I move that we extend the current ordinance till 12:01, September 26th.
Second, Lisa.
Okay, so I have a motion by Patty, second by Lisa. Any discussion on that motion? This will not need to be a roll call. So all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. So I think that, and then I guess for further modifications to this, we could discuss that at the next meeting and then schedule a public hearing, make modifications if there are things we do want to change. In the meantime, Dave, if you could look into, if there's anything that might apply to with the College Township restrictions, check and see what their restrictions were and how they might apply. That would be good.
Sure. Will do.
Okay. Next, we have Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board noise exemption process discussion.
Thank you. There's a great deal of narrative that's in your agenda. I'll touch base on some of the important components of this, and then answer any questions that the board may have. But essentially, and the board will recall that you enacted a resolution on August 3rd to support an exemption request submitted by the purveyor of Pine Grove Hall, Elizabeth Grove. This was to replace the applicable section of the Pennsylvania Liquor Code relative to audible noise at the property line. Essentially, Pennsylvania Liquor Code allows for no audible noise to be that originates within a licensed establishment to be audible at the property line. The township has its own noise ordinance that is also restrictive, but is not prohibitive in the sense that we do allow some measure of audible noise at the property line. Of course, this is a kind of a common issue that occurs throughout the state. So there is a process that the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board has laid out when a municipality would like to request that in lieu of the enforcement of that provision of the liquor code, the municipality's noise ordinance is preemptive. I had some misinformation that was the premise of the resolution that was talked about on August 3rd. Since then, I've had a chance to follow up with counsel from the Liquor Control Board and get further clarification on what the process is. And the correction is that the municipality is the petitioner in this case. In other words, the municipality would be asking the Liquor Control Board for the authority or the permission for it to enforce its own noise ordinance in lieu of the PA Liquor Code. So there's a number of things that have to be done in order for that petition to be submitted. The first would be most importantly would be for a public hearing to be held by the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board within the exempted area. So if the township were interested in specifically petitioning for an exemption for Pine Grove Hall, that would be where that public hearing would have to be hosted. Unfortunately, in my opinion, they haven't really been able to be nimble with the COVID times that we're facing, so they still require in-person public hearings. They are limiting attendance indoors to 25 individuals, so they would be compliant with the township's ordinance. And if there's more, they just allow them to queue up outside and then bring them in to offer testimony. Alternatively, what the township could consider is expanding that exempted area to incorporate either a larger geographic area or the entire municipality at large. What I'm recommending is that the board authorize this public hearing to apply for this exemption township-wide. I think we have other establishments in the township that probably have indoor music that may have some audible sound at the property line. There'd be a lot of confusion if the police department were put in a position where they had to enforce the liquor code over our own noise ordinance. And in my opinion, it just makes it cleaner and easier if the township enacts or implements or enforces its own regulations in lieu of the liquor code. So as I said, there's some logistical things that staff would have to work on. We have to provide maps of the geographic area. We would have to advertise it in a newspaper of general circulation, work with the Liquor Control Board to identify a date that's agreeable to them, that works for everybody. There would not be a need for board members to attend this public hearing because it is something that the PLCB is facilitating. Staff would attend, I would attend. I would encourage the solicitor to attend as well. And then, at the conclusion of that public hearing, the township can either elect to move forward with that petition for exemption, reverse course, change its geographic area limitation, depending on the testimony that you hear and what your interests are after the fact. So all I'm really asking for this evening is if the board's interested in moving forward with either just Pine Grove Hall, a broader area, or the entire municipality at large, and looking for the authorization to work with the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board to schedule that public hearing. It's a bunch of stuff for reference that I've included with the agenda. The applicable provision of the liquor control law is referenced in the narrative. Our noise ordinance has been included in case you were interested. There's also a copy of the resolution that was enacted on August 3rd, petitioning in support of the exemption requested by Pine Grove Hall. I'll answer any questions that you may have or clarifications.
Okay, so at this point, we're not scheduling any public hearing of our own. This is just authorizing Liquor Control Board public hearing.
That's correct. And
Okay.
the follow-up from the public hearing would be for the board to act on a resolution to include in the petition packet. So that would also be forthcoming at an upcoming regular meeting after that public hearing were scheduled by the PLCB.
Any questions? Okay, seeing none. Does anyone care to make a motion?
I, Laura, move the Board of Supervisors authorize advertisement of a public hearing on a township-wide noise exemption for licensed establishments under the Pennsylvania Liquor Code.
This is Patty and I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Next item is a review of the draft green infrastructure policy.
Centrise is gonna take the lead on introducing this one.
Dave. So the township receives requests by residents, staff, and the board to convert the passive areas within parks to low-mo or low-no-mo areas. And examples of that within the township include Cecil Irvin Park, Fairbrook Park, Tudick Park, and Haymarket Park. And for each of those examples provided to you, a different process has been facilitated by staff for the conversion, simply based on the nature of the situation and because there is no policy that exists to inform on how to process these requests or a managed consistent maintenance plan for any of the current or for in the future approved low-no-mo areas within the township. Attached with the agenda is a drafted green infrastructure policy prepared by staff and also reviewed by the Parks and Recreation Committee. And most recently, the manager and I met with Center Region Parks and Recreation staff to review the drafted policy for CRPR to ask questions and also provide input, as the Parks Committee did, on how to expand and improve the proposed policy. Also attached with the agenda are the comments reviewed by the Parks Committee, but unfortunately I have yet to get a chance to finalize the compiled comments discussed and reviewed with CRPR. That will soon be prepared and provided to the board. But I'll share with you the major takeaways from the two meetings. The definitions and park classifications were discussed at both meetings and seem as though it will be a helpful tool for staff, the Parks Committee, and CRPR. Everybody was we were all agreeable that the importance of having a shared understanding of terms that have consistent and standard definition and a level of maintenance would be advantageous for all of us, not only to review and approve or deny these requests, but also just simply to plan not for maintenance and have discussion on any one of those green infrastructures that exist or may exist in the future. Another takeaway that I have in my notes was the discussion on what you may have observed. There is a blank spot for funding and community engagement. Those two sections were left intentionally blank because of where the comprehensive recreation, parks and open space plan, there's some development and there's some discussion for some innovative opportunities, but seeing as how we may be the first municipality, we thought it would be best to go ahead and leave those areas blank and postpone the development of those two sections after giving Ferguson Township an opportunity, if the board is interested, of course, to approve the policy and have an observational period of just advancing the policy without those two sections. And lastly, staff from CRPR and Ferguson Township discussed moving forward with an addition that would include a more collaborative process between CRPR and staff to review and determine these requests, primarily because of the involvement from CRPR as it relates to maintenance for the green infrastructure that would be approved or considered. And so this evening, that essentially those are my takeaways, which hopefully will serve for now as a brief update from the two meetings. And I will take any comments or answer any questions from the board. I've also worked with Dave Dave and I have worked collaboratively on this. So anything that I can't answer, I'm sure Dave can assist, hopefully. There's some context. No, he says no. Primarily as it relates to the Tudic Park, there's some green infrastructures that were, approved before my time, and I really can't speak to that process. I can speak to some of the others. But. All right, questions, comments?
Hi,
Laura.
Steve. It's Laura. Thanks. Thanks so much for working on this policy. I guess I have a couple questions or comments. One is I'm pretty sure that this particular policy is just for green infrastructure in parks, and it does not include things like roadside mowing, even though at one point in time when we were talking about green infrastructure, we did include those kinds of things. But right now we're working on this particular policy as a communication tool for ourselves and with CRPR specifically about parks. Is that correct?
Yes, it's for parks only.
Okay, great. So there are some places that talk about the plan, in particular when referring to stormwater basins. So X, like little Roman numeral X, infiltration basin. Middle sentence, designed with low maintenance vegetation that gets maintained as defined in the approved plan. When it says approved plan there, is it the park plan, a plan that's developed when we develop this amenity, or is that leftover language from when we were talking about basins in the context of land development plans?
That's a great question, and it's not really defined there. I'll share with you the stormwater facility. They have their own maintenance plan that really is determined in a fashion that Dave Modriger could speak more to as it relates to engineering requirements. And and we were careful to we were cautioned to include stormwater facilities in this drafted policy for obvious reasons, right? We're not trying to discuss the maintenance plan as it relates to the stormwater facility in itself, but the maintenance plan that would be low maintenance for example, the seed for the, I'm drawing a blank here, to help with the infiltration, the seed mix that would, that's planted there. So essentially there's low maintenance to manage the grass that would be there, but there would still be a maintenance requirement for the actual stormwater facility.
So when it talks about approved plan, I'm sure if Ron Seibert had input onto the definition, we're talking about the approved stormwater management plan for that facility. So whether we're doing if we're doing a land development on township property at 3147 Research Drive, or we're advancing a phase of a park and it needs a stormwater feature because there's impervious area, staff or a consultant would have prepared a stormwater management plan. And that's all these stormwater management plans have maintenance plans within them. And you can see everywhere that references something that has to do with stormwater, that language is in there. So that's the stormwater, that's the township engineer saying, hey, you're not supposed to modify stormwater basins without getting approval.
Okay, so then in this policy, would there be a time where somebody's request would trigger a review of that plan? And I'm guessing yes. And if so, do you think this policy handles that? And if not, should it, I guess, is the question.
Well, so Yes, the answer to that is yes, and it's not really defined, and I'm just now realizing that. It would be through the review process, so the township manager would certainly have the first review to determine if this should be going through the process, right? Yes. And at which point, the township manager would then determine, which staff would need to be involved. Clearly, the township arborist would need to be involved. But in this scenario, if there was a recommendation for a green infrastructure to designate a green infrastructure within a stormwater facility, absolutely, we would have to have the township engineer review to determine if it's even feasible for that green infrastructure.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
That answers my question. So then let me jump down to where the manager is reviewing the request through the online form. Looks like it's page 7 in my PDF. It says, if the scope of work, like the request, is not within the purview of the township, the manager will dismiss the request. What kind of thing, since it's about a park, what kind of thing would you consider would be not in the purview of the township? Are we talking specifically like the 2-deck trust, or are there other things I'm not thinking of?
So probably not many examples in municipal owned parks. There are some where there are other interests that are involved, and Haymarket Basin is a good example of that. If, because of the responsibilities for maintenance and operational jurisdiction of the Tudic Basin, there are obligations that are assigned to Johnson Farm Associates, the land developer of the landings, the adjacent property development. And so in order for us to be able to pursue what we're doing with the Haymarket Basin, we had to get buy-in from all the signatories to that maintenance agreement. So I don't know it's necessarily that we didn't have purview in that respect, but there were other stakeholders that had to buy in to that stormwater management plan amendment and to agree to maintain it in accordance with our ordinance in order for us to move forward with the plans for that park. And there's probably some other examples of that may similarly apply, where basins are accepting stormwater runoff from upstream private development, and they may have an obligation to maintain some of that basin. And so I guess it would just be a matter of coordinating all responsible parties and ensuring that everybody has a good, clear understanding of what those maintenance obligations are and is willing to sign that amended agreement to commit to funding that additional responsibility.
Thank you, Dave. I have like maybe 3 or 4 more comments. In the list of natural areas like no-mow, meadow, grow zone, pollinator garden, that kind of thing, there might be some unintentional overlap, or maybe it's intended to be separate, but then maybe we have to add some information. So like grow zone is what we're calling the places in Fairbrook, but they could also be low-mow meadow, I think. And I mean, I don't mind. It's an observation that if we're trying to name things, I don't know, maybe grow zone is synonymous with natural area, and then all the other things are explications of grow zone. It's just a thought. One thing I'm wondering is a possible change to make. I've read quite a lot about trying to maintain the pollinator population in any one plot. And typically they recommend that you like never mow all of it at once. Now, I do understand that for certain features like the stormwater basins in particular, that type of a management is not necessarily going to happen. But in a place like the no-mow planted meadow, you could change your mowing to be 1/3 every year instead of once every 3 years. And then you would still mow each area in a timely fashion to keep the woody invasives down. but you're always maintaining your pollinator bank in that location. So it'd be a change I would suggest that where feasible in terms of maintenance of the amenity, switching your mowing regimen to always maintain a certain percentage, 2/3 if possible, of the habitat.
Thank you. I have that written down. So I should also share with you, so once all of these comments are compiled, the next step then would be for the manager and the public works director and I to meet to kind of put together, craft a very high level general maintenance plan that we could include. We're not trying to get into the weeds of operation. That of course is something that will be managed by Dave Modriker, but we want to be able to better expand on what low maintenance level means or moderate maintenance level means as recommended by the Parks Committee. So thank you. I have notes here and we'll include that in our discussion for maintenance.
Thanks. I think I have two more things. One is in your park classifications. I know that other agencies have reviewed this, but I think if this is going to be a communication tool between ourselves, our Parks Committee, the Park Authority, and the Park Agency, that we should probably separate out community parks and regional parks, because regional parks, we don't have anything to do with them other than being a partner in the COG. Whereas our community parks like Tudak, we have complete purview over. So this was something that we were trying to work on in the Parks Comp Plan. But I would suggest that in this document, we separate out community parks and regional parks as two different things.
Thank you. And that echoes another comment that we heard, and I'll share with you. Of course, I mean, we'll put this in and make some changes. It was in the comprehensive recreation plan. So for consistency, we just kind of threw it in there, but we're starting to hear that there is interest in separating those two definitions out. So thank you.
Yeah. I would think that we could just leave this as community parks. I mean, I think the regional parks would be community parks, but because of our peculiarity of nomenclature in the region, a regional park is something different than it is in most park documents.
That's a good point, Steve. It's like we actually cannot legally make a policy about the regional park, so you better get that out there.
Yeah. So I would say if we just drop the word regional because of the connotation locally that conflicts with a lot of documents you read about parks.
That makes a lot of sense, Steve.
Yeah.
Oh, so my last comment is, I'll take an example at Saybrook Park. There's a stormwater basin there that just has a lot of growth in it. I'm not even sure what it is. I think it's a little invasive. And like it could be a place where it was planted with some intentional seed mix. I saw in here that you want, it shall have at least 4 signs marking the amenity. If you were to change the bottom of that stormwater basin and plant it with a pollinator mix, would you actually want all the signs around that? Is that part of the kind of like getting people to be aware of it and giving input? Is that why those signs are mandatory? And is that your intent?
So the intent behind it was to serve as an educational function. Most of the material that was reviewed by Parks Association and whatnot indicated that educational component is an expressed item of interest by the community. That was the only reason for which I've included it. I don't know if there would be other interest from perhaps engineering or, within public works, but I included that as something that could serve as an educational function.
I don't know what the right number of signs is, but the signs that I see out and about that say grow zone, for example, I think are helpful and perhaps eliminate a lot of calls about why aren't you out here mowing the grass?
I agree with that. I just wonder if I mean, I don't know what the relevance in terms of policy, if it has shall versus might or whatever. But we might not want to, this could be up to staff. Like if you think it's good to put signs there to notify people, do it. If not, maybe we don't always need it. It's just a thought.
Okay.
And that's it. I'm done. Thank you so much for working on this. It's really nice.
Yeah.
It's great.
I do think the signs serve a very big purpose of when people look at them and it says this is an intentional pollinator garden, it suddenly looks very nice. When before they saw the sign, it looked like a weedy field that hadn't been mowed.
This is on purpose.
Yep.
Thank you, Laura. I've made
Yard.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments for Centrise?
I thought this was a really good draft that you presented to us. So thanks for all that work on this.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, I think we're definitely moving to establish a process for something we've been trying to do for several years. So it's good.
Okay. Well, I will continue to compile these comments and continue with the meetings to get us in a pre-final document in front of you for consideration.
Thanks. Okay. So there was no action on this and then tonight. Okay. Next item is under new business, the consent agenda, which consists of a number of pay applications, a traffic signal phasing, or that's a pay application for the traffic signal phasing changes, and a board member request for discussion of Whitehall Road Regional Park Project be added to a future agenda. So is there anything on the consent agenda that anyone would care to pull off for separate discussion? Okay, seeing none, I would take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda. This is Lisa.
Sanjit, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next item is a board member request for a resolution supporting HR 763. I believe that was Laura.
Thanks, Steve. Yep, that was me.
Okay.
There's a resolution included in your agenda to consider that we pass in support of the Carbon Act. And I think that, hello, hi, Linda. The resident from Pine Grove Mills who requested that we consider this is here to answer any questions that we might have about supporting this. So I guess I'll ask if any of the board members have any questions about this request.
Well, I guess Linda had requested that this be placed on through Laura. Would you want to comment on why you present this as a request, or?
Sure, yes. So first of all, I'm really glad to be a part of Ferguson Township because I'm stoked at how committed Ferguson is to trying to get our township and our country to have a really good carbon future. So the reason that I would like to bring up this bill for support, so this is a bill that's before Congress nationally right now. And if it passed, it would put a price on carbon and return all of the dividends to US households. This policy is widely supported by economists as a really effective way to reduce our emissions at the national level. It'll also make it easier to reduce our emissions locally by giving sort of a price advantage to more green projects. And so essentially it would just make our job easier here in Ferguson County and also do something good for the world if it were passed. So over 100 local municipalities have already endorsed this legislation, and if Ferguson would also endorse it, then that could just help it become law.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
So-
Linda. And I'm in support of this because I think it is a reasonable way for us to try to incorporate our carbon footprint that is not so, I don't know, it quantifies it and it helps us understand our impact. So it's something that I'm in support of, not externalizing our costs. So.
Well, would you care to make a motion?
Sure, Steve. I, Laura, will move that the Board of Supervisors authorize advertisement of a public hearing on this resolution in support of House Resolution 763, the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act.
Prosenjit, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote on the authorizing the advertising a public hearing. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So we'll have that on an upcoming meeting.
We'll get that on for October 5th.
For October 5th? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is the establishment of a vacancy period for township authorities, boards, and commissions.
Thank you. Provided with your agenda is a list of upcoming vacancies that are effective December 31st of this year on the township's authorities, boards, and commissions. In accordance with the board established policy, what I'm asking this evening is that the board authorize an application period beginning on October 1st, ending November 1st, 2020, for interested applicants to submit their request for consideration on any of our upcoming vacancies. There was one minor error in the document that was shared with the board agenda, and that was with Mr. Bill Keogh's expired term. I believe it references a term expiration of December 31st, 2021. It should be December 31st, 2020. So his term is coming up at the end of this calendar year as well. As I said, all that we're asking this evening is for the authorization to open the application period.
Okay, I think there's also another a change needs to be made on that. I am actually a member of the UAJA board, not an alternate, and I'm not sure when my term expires. I think it's the end of next year, but if you could check that.
Right, because you're serving the remainder of somebody's unexpired term.
Yeah, I'm finishing out an unexpired term. So, but I think it's next year, not this year. So, okay. So, do I have a motion?
Yeah, I, Prosenjit, move that the Board of Supervisors authorize the township manager to open an application period for vacancies on township authorities, boards, and commissions from October 1st, 2020 through November 1st, 2020.
I second, Laura. Sorry, Patty.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have staff and committee reports. The Finance Committee met September 10th. We received audit. The COG had a unqualified audit, which is good. So that was a good report. We had an update on the pension plan, reviewed the comments on the program plan, and those will be coming up at the upcoming Finance Committee meetings and the general forum. So we'll have further opportunity to make any comments on those. Let's see. Okay, we approved or voted in favor of a proposal for part-time regional fire protection hire. That was recommended by Steve Bear. And the sale of fire police vehicles to Bellefonte Borough. We had the vehicles that we no longer need, and we are selling at fair market value to the borough of Bellefonte. And approved a purchase of a tanker out of previously approved funds. They were approved for 2021, I believe, and we approved moving it up to 2020 because the fire director felt that it needed to be done now. So we approved that. And that's about it. We have our marathon review of the budget coming up in the next 2 weeks. Everyone's invited to attend. So those come up, let's see, what is it? This Thursday morning, next Wednesday, and next Thursday. So that was it for the Finance Committee. And we have Transportation and Land Use Committee.
Thanks, Steve. We met on the 14th and had a presentation from CATA on their status and how they're managing at this point. They did explain that even before COVID, they were already financially strained and had been making service cuts, as we know, because one was in Pine Grove Mills. And they also discussed the need for additional buses to service downtown with the new high rises. And so how they've been trying to figure that out. And they had a hard time planning for the fall, just not quite knowing what Penn State's plan was going to be, how many people would come back. So it's been a real challenge. And ridership is still way down. And that was about it. One thing that was working out well was the microtransit pilot project in Bellefonte. And so that's been continuing throughout all of this, and ridership hasn't been impacted on that at all. So that was good for them, and they're going to continue with that. In the next fiscal year, they're actually going to study bus rapid transit routes. So we'll look forward to hearing about that. And, just general concern about state funding falling. And also one interesting thing about their apartment contracts that they mentioned was the apartment contracts aren't producing exactly what they expected them to do. It's lower because the density per apartment isn't as high as they expected it to be. So just, I guess, based on prior formulas, they would think more people would live in an apartment. And now with these new high rises, fewer people are living in each apartment. So just, concerns in all areas of funding. So that was that. Then we had a presentation from Penn State on their building projects, and I forwarded to the board that presentation that we received. It was about 13 projects, and the completion dates, I had asked for some estimates. Of course, these are estimates, and they got back to TLU and with a list, and all of the projects that had been presented on had completion dates between 2021 and 2026. So the 2026 projects are, true guesstimates. So that's what they're planning for now. But I was surprised at how near those completion dates were. So the scope of the projects they presented was large. So if you haven't had a chance to look through that presentation, I would suggest, I had a list. It was really comprehensive. The Willard building is on there, the West parking deck, the art museum at the Arboretum, new physics building, Sackett building renovation, and Hammond building demolition were all on there. So it's quite extensive. So I would definitely encourage everyone to take a look at that. And the next meeting will be on October 5th at 12:15, and that is the joint meeting with the CRPC.
Thank you. Are there any other?
Steve, can I comment on that? Thank
Sure.
you, Lisa, for sending that presentation. And I am interested if Penn State can talk to us at all about their West Campus plans and expansion. I would love to have them give a presentation if they're willing, just a subset of that presentation that they did. So we understand what's going on in terms of, you know, the Buckout and West College area.
Okay. So Neil Sullivan is the representative on TLU. He's a planner at Penn State. So would you want me to just
Can we
start a
ask him?
conversation with him and see if he'd be interested, or would that need to go through you, Steve or
I
Dave?
think Dave maybe even.
More of a question. I guess Dave, it'd probably be better if you call him, or as opposed to board member. Or?
Yeah, I can reach out to Neil or Steve Watson and see if one or both of them would be willing to come and give a presentation at a future meeting. Sure.
Thank
Yeah,
you so
if
much.
we could get an update on not just the things in Ferguson, but the parts in the borough that would affect us as well would be.
Yeah, I was trying to zoom out in the pictures in that document, and they're like cropped it so close so you can't see what's around.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Presenter.
Yes, so Mr. Chair, the Spring Creek Watershed Commission had a meeting. May I report on that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so this Spring Creek Watershed Commission had a meeting on the 15th of September. And primarily, it was a shortish meeting, but primarily there was an educational topic, which was about contaminants of emerging concern specific to the Spring Creek watershed. And this was research done by Professor Heather Price-and-Dance at Penn State. So essentially what she and her group did was they went and looked at the wastewater and tried to see what is there. And the types of things that they were looking at was chemical particles that appear in medicines to figure out what medicines people are taking, or at least what medicines, chemicals are coming out into our water and into our watershed area. And so common medicines, common particles related to things like ibuprofen and Advil and so on, where they're in the water. Now they're working on looking at sort of COVID-related signs of COVID and so on in the water. So that, all that data is available publicly from their website. And she said that she would be very happy to help anyone take a look at it or get and download the data. So that was where we spend most of the time. The one water report plans with the executive committee, we did not have a quorum, so we couldn't vote and authorize the executive committee, the plans to go ahead. And essentially these plans are to go out and try to get funding and to figure out what exactly needs to be done. So this is about information gathering and figuring out what the plan should be for the committee to do things. Caitlin Tatey used to be the assistant who was, there's a part-time employee by the SCWC. She just went to Penn State to do a master's, and she talked about her thesis ideas and how she wants to tie it to the Spring Creek watershed. It's not decided that much yet. So, and then there was some talk of outreach to the community and other things were related to the budget. So that's what was discussed in this meeting.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, and next we have, are there any other committee reports that weren't on the agenda? Okay, let's see anything. We'll go with the manager's report then.
Thank you. My report is in your packet, so I'll keep my verbal report fairly brief. We did have a meeting of the Penn Prime Workers' Compensation and Liability Insurance Trust this past week on September 16th. Really, this was our most substantive meeting of the year. It typically is in September. We set our annual upcoming budget. We talk about rate structures and indemnification and reinsurance, et cetera, all the fun stuff. I sit on both trusts as a trustee of both the Workers' Compensation and Liability Insurance Trust. I also sit on the Loss Control and Claims Subcommittee, and I have for the past several years. So I appreciate the board's endorsement of my participation on that group. Preparations for the 2021 annual operating budget are well underway. I've included a operating budget schedule attached to my report, and you'll note that sometime mid-November, we will look to schedule the special meetings to discuss the 2021 operating budget. We will also, have an opportunity to present that to the board prior to that. And then tentative adoption will take place on December 7th with final adoption of the 2021 operating budget scheduled for the second meeting in December 14th. I'll respond to any questions the board may have.
Doesn't look
Dave,
like
I
we
have a
any-
question.
Okay, we do have a
Thanks.
question.
Kind of not really about your report, but so the signs that are potentially illegal or a violation of our ordinance at the tolls construction site, are they actually a violation of our ordinance? And do you know how long it will be before they're removed if they are?
Yes, I believe they are in violation. Not the entire sign, but particularly the portion of the signs that advertise apartments for lease. We have specific standards that apply to signage for lease or for rent dwellings. And it's my understanding that that's the provision of our sign ordinance that's being violated. The zoning officer has provided the property owner with notice of violation. They have 30 days to correct that or to file an appeal. I'm not really sure exactly where they are in that window. Typically before that, the formal citation is filed. We provide a warning letter that gives them a chance to correct the infraction before it moves on to a notice of violation. So I'd have to check to see exactly where they are in that process, but we have begun the enforcement of that, and we have found them to be in violation of that provision. We've spoken with the property manager and the property owner. Typically these things can be resolved through a simple phone call. It does not appear that they have, our proposed solution was that they would, sort of put a barricade or like put some kind of a cover on the portion of the sign that's not conforming with our ordinance. And they are permitted to put for lease signs up, but they have to be smaller than what they are. Essentially the violation is a size violation. So, we've given them the path to correct the violation. They just haven't done so yet. So we're going to continue to pursue enforcement and hopefully they'll comply.
Thank you, Dave. And then, so they know they're in violation, but they're just continuing it. Is there a time where they're actually going to be fined so that like we're at all compensated for that staff time that it takes to deal with this?
Yeah, citation with a fine would begin after typically we give this 30-day window. It's kind of a warning period for them to correct the violation on their own accord. After that is when we proceed with the NOV and the fines.
And then I've been thinking a lot about how College Township is choosing to deal with that violation of the masking ordinance and how they're making it like size appropriate. I don't know what they're scaling it. So when we have a violation of our sign ordinance, is there some sort of like per square foot of violation, or is it just like a flat fee for a violation?
It's just a blanket violation or fine that's assessed regardless of the magnitude of the infraction.
So like somebody who has 10,000 square foot of sign violation gets the same fine as somebody who has like 2 square feet of sign violation.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much for your information.
Lisa.
I also have a question not related to your report. And I'm realizing there were two other places I thought about bringing this up, but I was thinking too far ahead. So I had a comment from an ABC member who's having some computer issues. And it made me also wonder about other ABC members and their computer situation, internet situation, and how all those folks are managing. And I was thinking too, when I was looking through the agenda about possibly new people coming on who maybe haven't been used to the Zoom format and if they knew that this is how we're operating now. So I just kind of wanted to check on everybody's status to see if everybody has what they need and if I presume we're going to be in this format for quite some time. So I guess new folks who are joining would need to be aware of that in the application process.
We did issue a survey of our ABC members a few months ago after we went entirely virtual with our meetings. The response from that was overwhelmingly that people are comfortable and able to engage and participate in a virtual environment. We did have, I believe, one, maybe two members of our ABCs that expressed some concerns. Typically, we don't provide hardware to ABC members, but I think, if it's just a one-off here or there, we have a couple of spare laptops that we'd be happy to loan out. If it's really purely a hardware issue, of course, it doesn't address any problems with internet access or bandwidth that they may be experiencing. I think if that were the case, we could try to work through an accommodation where they can come to the township building and kind of have their own room, and we'll give them access to the public network so that they can have some generally high-speed internet, at least enough to accommodate a virtual meeting. But it's a good point, and we can make applicants for the upcoming vacancies aware that if they are volunteering to participate, it's an expectation that they have the hardware and the internet speed that can support the virtual meeting platform.
Great. And I was wondering, if somebody doesn't have reliable internet, if they can come into the municipal building and participate in their meeting from there and use that internet.
We could work that out. It wouldn't be my top preference, but because then, I would have to be there. Somebody would have to be there to let them in and out of the building and to facilitate that. And, our position has really been that authorities, boards, and commissions are meeting entirely remotely at this point. So, but I don't think if it was just one person or even two, that it would be a big deal either way.
So, and given that, we are meeting remotely, I'm fine with that. I don't know if, how that's going to continue, but since we are expecting them to meet remotely, I understand why we wouldn't normally issue computers or, maybe Wi-Fi boosters or anything like that. But I think in this situation, it might be something that needs to be considered. Are we getting support from that disaster recovery system that we're a part of that would go and issue laptops if, the building was flooded? Are we getting that kind of support from them where we could say, we needed 10 new laptops? Would they be in a position to supply that kind of thing? Or I don't need that kind of detail, but that's just what I was wondering.
Just shooting from the hip, I would think that our acquisition of hardware and any licensing or anything like that, an office license or a Windows license would be covered under the reimbursables from the CARES Act through the county block grant. What would probably not be reimbursable, or I think would be a little more difficult to parse out, would be the costs of our IT provider to set those machines up, to deploy them, to make sure that they have the firewall protection and the security measures installed on them. It's not to say we couldn't try. We would submit every cent that we thought was related. But yeah, I would think that the acquisition of the hardware would be a covered reimbursable expense under the county's program.
And I understand that normally, it wouldn't be a necessity because we'd be meeting in the building. But I think, those folks are volunteers, and if they're giving their time, then, I hope we can kind of set them up for success, and that, not that it's a big bonus to have a little Chromebook or something, but, just something that they have adequate access.
Yeah, I've had one ABC member reach out to me and request some hardware to support his needs. I believe we provided that. I'm not directly involved with it. I'd have to check with the finance director, but I think he facilitated a spare laptop for that individual to use. If anybody else approaches me, I'll take it certainly as a case by case basis. We have a handful of what we call hot spares because they're ready to go if we have a failure. I think Dave may still be using one actually. I know he had an issue a couple weeks ago. I've been fighting through an issue with my laptop. Fortunately, it's back online. So we do keep a couple online and ready to go that we could lend out as needed. And I'll entertain if anybody approaches me, I'll let you know.
Oh, great, thank you.
Anything else for Dave? Okay, the next is the Public Works Director's report.
Good evening. My report is also in your packet. There's 3 items I'd like to touch on. Tree Commission met tonight. The topic of discussion was the proposed tree preservation ordinance. That continues. They did set up a work session on October 1st to continue the dialogue. And then we'll see how far they get and if it continues into the next meeting. But then they'll be working on the heritage tree resolution and the official plant list. So they are making progress, but they're definitely spending a lot of time in discussion. On the Public Works building that you see under construction, there's a lot of activity. The 2 most obvious are people on the roof installing the white rubber roof and the people on the outside putting up the block and the brick. So there's a lot of other activities going on. And the other item I just wanted to report on that you're well aware of, we did have postcards that were sent out advertising the Board of Supervisors work session on September 23rd for the proposed storm water fee, in addition to the October 5th hearing to consider the ordinance for enactment. There's been a lot of inquiries as of recent that I've received, as well as other staff, and the board may be receiving some communication. So we're preparing for those 2 events. Other than that, I can answer any questions that you might have on my report or direct them to Dave if you have anything at all that you'd like to ask.
Okay.
Just a quick
Looks like
question.
Lisa has a question.
On the agenda that was sent out for Wednesday's meeting, I thought it said that the start time was 4 p.m., but then the postcard said 6 p.m. And I know the Pine Grove Mills meeting was on that same email, and that was 4 p.m. Now the postcard did say 6. So I am looking for it now, but
It should be 6 for the stormwater meeting.
okay.
So we'll get a correction out.
Are you following up on that piece of it, Dave?
I'm making a note right now.
Okay, I can't bring it up right now, but I just wanted to make sure that like the time that it started and the Zoom link maybe weren't copied and pasted onto the other one. So, but it is 6 p.m. Okay.
As long as it was right on the postcard, then I think we're in good shape. We can change
Yes.
Yeah,
We can update the agenda easy enough.
we can update the agenda easily.
But yeah, I just wanted to double check on that Zoom link in case it was copied from the small area plan agenda. Okay. Thank you.
All right. And next we have the Planning and Zoning Director's report.
Yeah, I
Jenna's not
gave
here,
Jenna the
so I
night
can-
off. She's been burning midnight oil at workforce housing, and she was at the tree commission meeting. So I thought she could use a night since she didn't have any agenda items. But her report is in the packet. Planning Commission had their meeting on September 14th. The State College Borough Water Authority Land Development Plan was reviewed. Of course, as the board knows, there was a joint meeting that was held to provide recommendations on zoning map amendments. And there was another joint meeting held with the Planning Commission to talk about the draft workforce housing amendment. Schedule and list of active land development plans is listed there for your review. And there is one upcoming request for variance to be scheduled. That's West Gatesburg Road. We have an application for a variance that the zoning hearing board will be asked to review on September 22nd tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. And we have the Chief of Police.
Thank you. My board report is in the packets. It is a summary of the police department's activities for August. In general, the calls for service and our crimes remain down, although we're seeing a slight uptick in some of the activity. Some incidents throughout the month. We had 3 heroin-related arrests during the month, and we also had a heroin overdose. We're investigating that to see if we can find the origin of the drugs and arrest the source. Of other significance, we had a jury convict a 25-year-old man that was charged with rape, aggravated assault. Essentially, he was breaking into apartments and filming women as they sleep, and in one case, he actually sexually assaulted one of the women. There's additional charges pending on him. The arrest or the conviction is for an arrest that occurred in 2018. My use of force report is attached to the board's report as well. And if anybody has any other questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Any questions for the chief? Okay. Seeing none, I guess we, do we have any communications to the board that should be shared?
Laura, I've
Laura?
gotten several communications about the stormwater fee.
Okay,
I've had the same.
and so have I.
Yeah, and so did I, and I met some of them and talked about things, and there's some information requests that I'll possibly consult Mr. Pibulka and get back to them.
And under calendar items, we have our special meeting on Wednesday.
We do.
For stormwater fee. Saturday, October 3rd is the virtual coffee and conversation.
And a couple other items that I should mention too. Tomorrow from 3 to 4 p.m. is a virtual bike chat. Jenna Wargo, the planning director, is going to be kind of facilitating that and taking the lead. So there's a link to that on our website to for anybody interested in participating. And then on Thursday, September 24th at 4 p.m. is the second meeting of the Pine Grove Mills Small Area Plan Advisory Board. So there's an agenda that's available on the website, and it is a virtual meeting if anybody is interested in attending.
Okay, thank you. So anything else that anyone cares to bring up? If not, I'd take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We're adjourned.
Good night.
See everybody on Wednesday.